Hello, vegans of the earth. My name is Jordan Arell, and today I'd like to talk to you about why the same values that caused me to be vegan also caused me to be extremely against infant circumcision. Because I think some vegans don't really think much about this issue and don't see how they're connected. But to me, they're actually very, very closely connected. If you want to know more about my personal story on circumcision, you can see the link below in the description. But as for this issue, it's really my values that actually, I think, align closely one to the other that cause me to be so passionate about both. So the first part of that is the ethical question of what we are doing, to these animals, to these living creatures. We are basically torturing them in factory farm conditions. It's barbaric. It's absolutely horrendous what we're doing, and we don't have the right to do that. These conscious beings, it's completely unethical to imprison them and enslave them for our own trivial food preferences. In the same way, I think that it's not right to cut into an infant's flesh. It's excruciatingly painful, and the younger you are, the more you feel pain. Doctors used to think that babies don't feel any pain, and so a lot of them still, around half doctors, still do circumcisions with no anesthesia whatsoever. It's extremely painful for babies and is proven to cause post-traumatic stress disorder, increased sensitivity to pain, difficulty being able to understand men's emotions, express emotions. And it's wrong. It's wrong to do that to a conscious being. We don't have the right to inflict as incredible suffering as you can inflict on a being, ripping his genitals to shreds. It's an extremely painful procedure. You can see it online, though I wouldn't really recommend it unless you've got a good stomach for it. It's horrendous. And so, as a vegan, I also really think nature has a lot of intelligence, and so I think it's good to eat a very high vegetable, high nuts diet, because those things are what come from the earth, what we've eaten for tens of thousands of years. Nature evolved us to eat those things, and we're not supposed to eat nearly as much meat that we're eating, maybe a little bit, but you really don't need it. And vegans are also very health conscious, and so they find ways to supplement their diets and eat extremely healthy a lot of the times. In the same way, nature has an intelligence with putting the foreskin there. It's there for a reason. It wasn't an accident of evolution. It's extremely important because it covers the glands. It protects the glands. The glands will dry out and become very calloused and less sensitive. It supplies important functions in sex, such as lubrication. Intact, uncircumcised men don't need lubricant ever, really, for hand jobs, for masturbation, for sex, because the penis knows how to lubricate itself. We didn't evolve to need to go to CVS for lube. And the foreskin's there for so many reasons. It's super pleasurable, serves functions, and it also helps with health. Actually, it protects the penis from disease because it's a covering that really protects the opening. People in other nations like Europe and Asia that don't circumcise really have lower rates of all of the diseases that circumcision supposedly prevents. And so, from a health standpoint, it makes way more sense to not cut off part of your body that's naturally there for important reasons. It seems like common sense, but our doctors don't seem to understand that for some reason, which really has to do with the next reason, which is that society puts certain forces on us. For example, the factory farming industry is one of the biggest industries in the world. It lobbies the government to get funding for it. Otherwise, we wouldn't eat meat. It just wouldn't make sense. It's extremely costly to us, to the earth, to our health in so many different ways. But there are these huge industrialized giants that create propaganda that try to get us to eat meat. And it's not good. I think we all agree that it's good to have critical thinking skills to buck society. These are strong vegan values, to really think about what's right, what do I want, what makes sense. And, it doesn't actually make sense to eat meat. You find that it's really just an imposition by the powers that be. And in reality, there's no good reason to eat meat. In the same way, there's basically a institution called the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a trade organization, essentially, that, it's like if a plumbing society told you need to replace your pipes every 5 years. It's like, whose best interest is that in, really? Like, you make a lot of money off of this procedure, and there's huge legal liability involved in saying that we may have done something wrong. The history of this started in the Victorian era to prevent, pleasurable sex. It was supposed to make it so you couldn't masturbate as easily. And so, let's just shove that under the rug. And this basically medical organization has produced policy statements that are utter nonsense, that make no sense at all, and are just kind of covering its ass. And it's so fucked up and wrong, that there's this whole entire industrial complex. It's essentially a circumcision conspiracy. It's hard to believe, but if you want to go more into this, watch Eric Klopper's play Sex and Circumcision. It's fantastic and really explains this in great detail. But once I started to realize that, this is the reason my parents believed it. This is the reason that everybody around me believes that circumcision is okay. It's because that's what our society has brainwashed into believing, because that's what benefits the people at the top, and that's the reality of what's going on here. Vegans are very future-thinking people. They see where society is going, what's ultimately right, and move towards that. And that's why veganism is greatly on the increase, in the same way that circumcision is much on the decrease. Leaving your babies intact is becoming the new norm, and the people who are thinking ahead, who really see what's going on, are the ones pushing that forward, or the reason that we are stopping circumcising, that we are probably now below 50%, and continue to drop very rapidly, which is awesome. So I'm really glad to be at the front of that trend, of both of those trends. My really favorite reason that that I am against circumcision is that I'm pleasure positive. And in the same way, I think vegans are very for pleasure. They're very against the pain of animals, very for pleasure of human beings. At the same time, though, they invent continuous ways to make vegan food delicious, finding different meat substitutes, different interesting recipes, different ways to make being vegan actually really, really, really enjoyable. The main reason people hate circumcision so much is because the foreskin is extremely, extremely pleasurable. Men with foreskins can usually have multiple orgasms just by touching parts of their foreskin. And it's actually got most of the nerve endings in the penis. It's super, super good feeling. The ridge band, the frenulum and frenular delta, the inner foreskin are all the most, pleasurable parts of the penis. They're all removed during sex. And I really, really, really hate that was taken from me, because I think pleasure is a good thing. I'm not against pleasure like some of our ancestors have been, which is, again, why circumcision started. But I think pleasure is a positive, and I think that we should value that, and I think that we should realize that foreskin feels extremely good. Men lose their foreskins, and they often say it's like losing their eyesight, not being able to see anymore, or like going from color to black and white, or like the difference between wearing a condom and bare skin. Like, that's how dramatic of a difference it is being circumcised versus having been intact. A lot of men are very, very sad and upset about if they get circumcised in adults. A lot of men also circumcised as infants are increasingly upset. Finally, people who are vegan are often very environmental conscious. They see that, factory farming, animal products, all these things are really destroying the world, and it's not sustainable. And, frankly, that's enough reason in itself to be vegan. Even if you ignore all the other ones above, we're destroying the world by using animal products, by all of the carbon produced, all of the land that's destroyed. It's horrendous. And, I think people who are against circumcision also see that it is a sort of a mindset that is destroying our world. The two biggest groups of circumcising societies in history are Americans and Islam, which is actually quite significantly bigger than America, but those are the two groups that circumcise the most. And they also happen to be the most warmongering societies in the history of history, I would say. Just from my understanding of the issue, they both seem to be very violent and very turbulent places, the Middle East and America, and they're really the only two that have a lot of circumcision. And you have to wonder what portion of that violence is due to them having had their genitals ripped apart as children, as their first memory. And again, the PTSD that comes from that, the pain that all of your neuronal firings are then built upon from that point forward. It's incredibly traumatic for a baby to experience what's essentially genital mutilation. It's really, really, really painful for the baby. And, I really, really hope that very soon we will realize that all of these are really significant reasons to both be vegan and to not circumcise your sons. I think that the truth will prevail, that, these values are essential, and that will only become increasingly apparent as time goes on. Brendan Marotta is releasing a documentary film called American Circumcision on August 31st. I'll also link that below, as well as Sex and Circumcision, if you're interested in that, which is another great resource that I think will really transform this issue in our country. And I'm really, 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 really excited for the day when we don't kill any more animals, when we don't torture any more animals, when we don't torture our baby boys, and we don't destroy parts of their genitalia unnecessarily. And I think the day for both of those are coming really soon, which makes me really happy. So thank you all so much for being parts of these movements. I really, really appreciate people like you who make the world a better place. So stay tuned, spread the word, subscribe if you like this, and keep on, sharing this information, sharing all these things so that we can ultimately create a world that we all want to live in. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later.